Welcome to Romans, God's Solution to Our Problem, a devotional series by Sumo Youth. Make sure you've got a pen and your copy of Romans with you, and if you haven't already, pause the video and pray that Jesus speaks to you through His Word today.
Hey guys, welcome to day 33 of our devotional videos. Again, remember, if you haven't already done day 3, that might be a good place to start today. Some of the things we're going to talk about today kind of flow from things that we talked about last time as we went through the book of Romans. But today, day number 33, we're looking at chapter 1. We're going from verse 18 to the end of the chapter. It's quite a hard little bit to read. What this section's talking about is it's saying this is what people are like when they reject God, when they rebel against Him, when they don't want to worship Him and don't want to follow Him. So some of the things it talks about are quite hard for us to read because it's painful to think about what this world is like when it doesn't want to follow God. But here's the questions which I want you to think seriously and honestly about after you read this passage. First one. Which of the sins from this chapter do you see around you in the world? Which of the sins do you see? It might be you see it on the news, might be you see it in friends and family, it might be that you see it on Facebook or on the internet. But what are some of the sins mentioned, the ways of rejecting God, which you see in the world around you? The second question, I think this is maybe even more important. Which sins from this chapter do you still see in yourself as well? Not just looking at others and judging them, but what sins that are here do you still see in your own heart and in your own life? And the third question is to do with a phrase that's right at the end of the passage that we've read, at the end of chapter 1. Here's the question. If this world actually approves of sin, and it encourages people to sin, then in a world that's like that, how can we stand out for Jesus? If this world actually approves of people sinning, then how can you stand out for Jesus? Read the rest of chapter 1, pause the video, think about those questions, and then hit play again, and we'll talk about the answers. Hey, welcome back. So what are some of the sins that you came up with? Hopefully you scribbled some of them down in your booklet. What are some of the sins in this chapter which you can see in the world around you? Well, there's some big ones, aren't there? It seems like one of the big things which Paul sees as a sign of people rebelling against God, that he brings up early and brings up a lot, is actually sexual immorality, isn't it? It's a lack of restraint and a lack of purity sexually between people. And that might be people committing adultery, that might be people, the phrase sexual immorality might mean people sleeping together before they're married. He talks in this about homosexuality. And I think all of those things, people using sex the way God didn't intend it to be used, are all things which we see around us, aren't they? The things which we see in the TV shows we watch, in the movies we watch, maybe that we hear the kids at school talking about things sometimes which we're tempted to do ourselves. And Paul says here that those are a sign of a world that's going against God. That's a bit convicting, I think. There's heaps of other stuff too, that's not all of it, but that's the big one which Paul seems to hit. And then he's got that big long list, doesn't he? About evil and coveting, right? Just being jealous, people being angry, murder, strife, just people fighting and a lack of peace, gossiping, slandering, people straight out hating God. I think we see all of those things in the world around us. Everything that's listed here rings true for me, that what God's saying about what this world is like matches with the world I see outside my door and through the screen when I look on the computer or on the TV. It makes sense. But then what if I stop thinking just about the world around me and look at myself? Well, isn't it weird that in the midst of that list, and there's some of them where I'm like, I don't murder, that's easy, I don't hate God. Then there's things which I remember back to when I was younger, and in the whole list of all of that, it says disobedient to parents. And you go, wow, suddenly that brings it a little bit closer to home, doesn't it? Coveting, that brings it closer to home. Do I ever look at other people and I want what they have? I get jealous of what they have. I start realizing that I actually participate in exactly what Paul's talking about here, this living, rejecting God. Slander, do I sometimes bag people out behind their backs, pick on people when they're not around, say mean things about people just for my own selfish reasons? Yeah, I think sometimes I do. And the more I read through that list, the more I have to confess that I'm a part of this problem as well, so I need whatever God's solution to it is going to be. The last question. If this world approves of people sinning, and it does, doesn't it? It glorifies them in the movies and on TV, and they're proud of it, and maybe even within your friends at school, it's hard to want to follow God because people think it's cooler to do the things that are in this chapter. If this world approves of people sinning, then how can we stand up for Jesus? Well, if we know what he wants, and that means we need to spend time in his word and getting to know God better and understanding why he tells us to live the way he tells us to. But if we get to know him better and we know his word better, then when we make a stand for living his way, not only does that please him and we're living for him, but that'll actually stand out to our friends, to the people around us who think that it's cooler to sin. Right? That us saying no to some of those temptations and the things that they want us to do, whether that's disobeying parents, whether that's that sexual immorality that came up earlier, whether that's gossiping or slandering, whatever it happens to be, whether it's violence and aggression, whatever it is that they want us to do, when we say no to that because we want to live God's way, we actually show that person that God is someone special who means a lot to us. And we tell them that they should take God seriously as well. So actually, in a world where people approve of sin, that gives us a great opportunity not to sin, but instead to stand up for Jesus in our school, in our family, with our friends, wherever we find ourselves. Take a moment and maybe pray that God will help you with that, because it's not an easy thing to do, to stand up for him, to do the right thing when everyone around us wants us to do the wrong thing. So take a minute, pray, maybe confess to God the ways in which you participate in this sinfulness of humanity. Confess that to God and ask that he might help you stand up for him in the midst of a sinful, broken world.